Hey everyone, well, we're back again. Welcome to our channel, and hopefully we're going to have an information fest here again. Welcome to the University course of Melvin. I seem to, people kind of caught on to that, and some of the comments I got on my last video kind of deal. So I guess I better watch what I say. Okay, the video I'm going to give a bash to today is going to be one that's going to be challenging to say the least. Because again, I've been requested to speak about the vulnerability of men as they go through this evolutionary, spiritual, twin flame soulmate connection relationship type of situation. I'll edit the title down once I get into it. But I'd like to remind everybody to please keep in mind here that when I'm presenting information, it is not my intention to affront anybody with their belief systems, although, as you've probably heard me say in the past, that evolution waits for no one and for no one's belief systems. And I follow that wide open. So when I'm giving information, I'm giving it for the purpose of, shall we say, insight for people going on the pathway. It is not intended in any way, shape, or form to impart written in stone information to anyone. So there will be variations of anything that I say and exceptions to the rule. So please keep that in mind. And the other comment as I make is please keep in mind I am not in and should not be included in the spiritual community, of which I don't participate in per se. I'm simply an individual going through the process myself, having had that connection with the twin flame connection that I'm in and imparting information in that format. So there you go. Okay. Now, it was kind of funny the other day. I read a comment, and I think it was on Facebook, and the lady made the comment that she was anxiously awaiting for when her twin flame should wake up and become emotionally vulnerable. And I go, oh geez, are they ever going to get it? So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try to give some information today. And one of the advantages that I have in being here a very long time, especially on YouTube and doing a lot of counseling for a lot of people over the year, I have had the opportunity to have connection with a lot of men who, I need to say this as we can say safely, you would not consider them part of the spiritual community. I find, with the exception of a few, the majority of the men who are having these twin flame connections are only getting information because usually it's the lady that informs them of what they might or might not be. As a general rule, the ones that I have come across have been referred by somebody, excuse me, and they are not in the spiritual community, as I mentioned. They have no insight, no knowledge, and no experience of all of the haberdashery of information that's out there. So these are the men that I want to talk about, not the ones that are in spiritual community that are awakened per se or believe they are, but the ones in the general population who are having this experience, which ladies are connecting with. And I've had the opportunity to counsel a good number of them, and they all come from many different walks of life. They come from the average person to the company CEO, the executive, politician, lawyers, professors, every walk of life. And I've had the opportunity to connect with them. And one of the things that seems to come up, and I understand this totally, is, and I want to talk about it in this video because it doesn't seem to be coming. Nobody else seems to be getting into this, so I'm going to get into it. Because I think some people out there in the spiritual community, especially in the twin flame community, have really missed the boat on this one. So I'm going to let it fly. The general format that I find with these men, now remember I've categorized them in the general population, that I do and have had a chance to speak with, the one thing that they talk about as being so difficult in these connections is not necessarily the connection with the twin flame, the soulmate, whatever title you want to use, blah, blah, blah. But in actual fact, that in itself is a challenge. But what becomes more of a challenge is all of a sudden, because of this twin flame connection and all of these latent abilities awaken, and some of you ladies are very much aware how suddenly you've got very creative, in the bubble love phase or the mystical phase, and you can communicate back and forth with your twin flame, and it's going well for a while, and then it ends and all shit hits the fan type deal. What happens with the men is you have to keep in mind here, ladies, that most of these men are not what we would call awakened per se. They have no really minimal or none of the empathic abilities. They have no sense really of intuition to the greater degree. And what happens to them when the twin flame connection takes place? As I stated already, they get into this, and they could be married, they could be single, or whatever. I mean, there's lots of variations going on here. So the possibilities and the probabilities here are endless of the unique kind of a mess that can end up manifesting in some of these situations. So what happens, you have a male like this who has no awareness of it, wakes up, has an intense heart center awakening, an intense level of attraction to this person. And as the woman, as the man, suddenly begins to awaken, and he becomes very intuitive all of a sudden, and having no previous experience about being empathic, no highly developed intuition, and none of that has happened before. Suddenly, all of that awakens almost overnight. Can you possibly imagine what the male might be going through when all of a sudden that empathic ability awakens within him? All right. And suddenly, from a guy who is just your basic guy, your basic company executive, your contractor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all of a sudden he can feel, pick up, sense everything from everyone that's going around him. All of the emotional turmoil, their issues, in some cases their physical disabilities, and this can be the people around him, but what about his family? Suddenly we have a very unfeeling male or non-empathic male who suddenly has all of that on him overnight. Think about that for a second. And here's something I want to impart to the ladies also. Keep in mind of what I've just mentioned, but remember, one of the things that I know about ladies, they have, it seems to be naturally because of their sensitivity, their gentleness, and their lack of nastiness, okay? I mean, we all know that men are brutal and they're nasty as a general rule. That all of the problems in the world are usually caused by nasty men with power and authority in some way, shape, or form. And we're brutal. We understand that. I get it. A lot of you women out there see men as being very brutal. And I get it. You want some payback for some of you. And I get that too. So most women tend to be somewhat intuitive. And I'm constantly hearing about ladies who are emphasizing they're very empathic. And they can sense what he's feeling, they can sense what he's doing, and blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. And I've proven that to be an unbalanced theory also by simply checking on it in the past and found out what they think he's feeling wasn't what he was feeling at all. In actual fact, what he's feeling is all of that gigantic field of emotion and what's going on with other people suddenly all comes to him all at once. I ask you, How do you think he's going to feel? And then he's connected with the twin flame connection on top of that. How do you think he's going to feel, ladies? Think about that for a second. Leave your interests out of the picture and think about how that poor son of a bitch is going to feel. All of this stuff coming at him, and he was never aware of it before. And suddenly at the emotional level, all right, this ability awakens, and he's picking up on all of this stuff, his family members, his friends, everything. He's picking up on all of this stuff at the 10th degree. What do you think is going to happen to him? He's going to be overwhelmed. What is he going to do? All right? What is he going to do about it? Somebody's going to say, well, he's going to run. Yeah, they do that. I know lots of women that run too, so it's pretty much equal on both sides here. Let me share something with you from a male perspective, all right? When I began my awakening myself, all right, I didn't have a Kundalini awakening, a heart center awakening, and the empathic abilities all come into play at the same time. They were split up over a few years, which gave me an advantage, which you don't have anymore. I had a Kundalini awakening first, and then I didn't have the heart center awakening until 5 years later. So I had a time to balance out some stuff, and I developed the empathic abilities. And what happened is I found out that once I started to develop them, what happened is I was picking up continually on other people's junk, lower vibrational energies, their physical disabilities, and if you think you can't pick up their mental disorders or malfunctions, you can do that too. Yes, that's what I said. Empaths can take on the symptoms of someone's physical diseases and or symptoms. They can take on the mental dysfunctional patterns, of individuals also. And the last place you want to be is picking them up from the emotional center. That's the last place. Fortunately, what happens now is you have a heart center awakening and a Kundalini awakening at the same time. And another process comes into play, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. The more I talk about the process of evolution and the, shall we say, the reconstruction of relationships, the more I think people are starting to know that it's not going to happen by osmosis. There is a challenge for everybody who gets the gift of doing this, all right? And believe it or not, we are going to learn to be nice to each other, one way or the other. Now, my capacity or understanding of being nice to each other is not quite the same as everybody else's, all right? It's not. I see things much differently. And sooner or later, we're all going to realize we're all going to have to learn the process of evolution in regards to relationship and its remodification and remodeling. And you're going to have to understand it from a personal level, being you, and he's going to have to do it from a personal level, being him. Like it or not, you're going to have to do it sooner or later. So going back to myself, when I had the intuitive faculty come into play, how did I deal with it? And how did these men deal with it? I'm going to tell you how, by using myself as an example, and then sharing a little bit of some of the other stuff that I know the men are doing also. When I was in the beginning becoming very empathic, and when I mean empathic, like right now I can talk to somebody on Skype and I can literally jump right into them. When I read comments that people put up on my Facebook page or anybody else's, I can jump right into the consciousness and read where that person is coming from, a personality trait. I can pick up on any dysfunctional mental patterns that are there. I can tap into their emotional self. And I'm not doing a resume here. I'm just telling you what I can do. And I'm not bragging, I'm stating a bloody fact. It's very simple. Of course, somebody will say, oh, there he goes, he's bragging again. I don't brag, I don't have to. I state, and it's a fact. So what happened was this, is as I unfolded and the empathic abilities were expressing, but mostly from the emotional center, I found myself overwhelmed. For example, I used to work as a locomotive engineer at one time. And what we used to do was come down at lunchtime, we all go in, the guys all go in, and they would go into the lunchroom, and there'd be 50 or 60 guys sitting in there. And then when it really started, and started getting really bad for me, I go into the lunchroom and I'm feeling very uncomfortable all the time. And I couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. And this is just one example. So I'm sitting there one day and I'm trying to eat my lunch and I'm just feeling like I'm walking around in a big mud pond. Right? And I can't really see or where I'm going, and just all this crap coming at me. And there was one guy, he was sitting at the next table, and he was really shooting his mouth off. He was saying about him and his wife were getting a divorce, blah blah blah, and he had a bank account. She had no idea how much money he's got in there. So all of a sudden I yelled out right loud, and I didn't even think about what I was doing. I just blurted it right out. I said, "Yeah, wouldn't she have a shit fit if she found out you had $25,000 in the bank?" Well, you could have heard pin drop in the room. And after that, things changed. I realized that I had done something that, had I been in a different frame of mind or a different state of consciousness, I would not have done. Because this all came from an emotional response to a stimuli that came from somebody else that I had tapped into. So what I learned to do after that was I learned to create, and I'm going to call this a mental wall. And that wall, if I can put it that way, was a defensive mechanism that would protect my identity, protect my individuality, and protect me from certain energies or certain vibrations and even certain people. And after that, I stopped having lunch in the lunchroom as a defensive mechanism. I adapted to my environment. And what I did was, every time that I found myself in a situation where the empathic ability would again get enhanced, because I realized something after that, because I was kind of on the ball. I figured, well, if it started now and I'm having to adapt now, then this is probably going to continue. And it did, because it was about, like I said, about 5 years later, I was already involved in a spiritual community, doing meditation classes, and I had a period where I was also counseling and doing readings for people. And then one day I had a heart center awakening. And I have to say this, I was fortunate at the time. I didn't know it then, but I was. But I was sitting in my living room at home. I had bought my own house. I was single at that time. And I was sitting in my living room watching television. And all of a sudden I got this really big burning, like, wow, energy sensation in the middle of my chest. And I'm sitting there and I'm going like, what the, that word kind of thing. And anyways, at the same time I'm feeling this energy coming out of my chest, I had a set of Venetian blinds on the window, and I know those things are pretty heavy. And all of a sudden the Venetian blinds started swaying back and forth like this, and I'm going, okay, cool, this is neat. But what happened after that is I realized that I became even more empathic from that point on. But the empathic sensation was different this time. Now this is just for me, all right, just for me, keep this in mind, but relate this to other men who have no experience at all of what's going on, and then you'll get more understanding of why these guys are having such difficulty and giving you ladies such difficulty in these twin flame connection. So for me, what happened at that particular point, I knew that something dramatic had happened. And I started after that because I actually at one point felt I was in love with 3 men and a guy. I've said this story before, I'm not going to get into it again. But I realized that what happened after that particular point is a transition started to take place. And instead of feeling it so much from the emotional center of the solar plexus, feeling my empathic abilities, okay, which really is a challenge for men. And initially it's going to happen to every man that has a heart center awakening before he transitions up into the heart center, where he experiences empathic abilities from the heart center, not the solar plexus, which is where you want to go, which is where you really want to go, which is obviously why I'm such a fanatic for heart center development in people. It's the only chakra that is the most important of all. I don't care what anybody else says. It is the most important chakra as long as you're in the physical body. Anything above your head, anything below your feet is irrelevant to proper development of the heart center chakra and expressing your identity, your spirituality, and your spiritual gifts, one being empathic abilities. And the other thing that I want to mention here also is this. Sooner or later, we have to start talking more about this empathic part of ourselves and how we're dealing and doing with it, because we're all going to go there. There are going to be no exceptions. And we're all going to start off at the emotional level, as if you're starting at the lower vibration, you're going to work your way up. There's no quick fix. There's no magic bullet. There's no magic meditation that's going to get you there. It's a process of evolution that's going to take place in your energy field, your chakra system, and your nervous system, and your body, and your endocrine system in sequence as you go along, as you develop your consciousness, all right? There is no reason on this planet today why we're having people suffer with dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and all of these mental disorders that are showing up in older people. There's no logical reason for it. It is simply improper living when they're younger, improper diet, and improper environment. That's all it is. The whole idea of the evolutionary process is going to change all of that. So what happened after that was I started to, again, build a mental concept, if you will. I'm going to change the wording around a little bit periodically here, to analyze and intellectualize where I was at based on that heart center awakening. One of the things that I started doing, and I did this immediately when I had the episode with the 3 ladies and the men, which didn't go anywhere, and I needed to do something. And I think more people need to start doing this, and they need to start focusing on this. It's very, very important. I didn't really know why I was doing it at the time, but I know now it was crucially important. I knew at that particular point that I didn't really have a concept of love that was my own. And I'll tell you something. Most people out there right now don't have a concept of love, relationship, or sexuality that is their own. They are reacted to, stimulated by, and fall into the category of that expression is gifted to them by their peers, their parents, their friends, television, their religious indoctrination, and also their genetic and hereditary parts of themselves that they have inherited from their genetic or bloodline or their soul growth. And somebody goes, wow, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, you better start thinking of it that way. Because most of you have that concept of love that's not your own, never was. You're simply reacting to what you've been programmed with. Most of you have no concept of relationship that truly is your own at this point. And remember, now variations either, okay, and exceptions, because people have already done what I'm saying here now. I'm just saying the majority of people haven't. Most people have not had a concept of their own that they've created about relationships, and especially about sexuality, okay? We could go into documentary evidence here that would go on for weeks in regards to sexuality, and I can tell you, we would be stepping on a multitude of toes, belief systems, ideologies, and philosophies in regards to sexuality that would cause a shitstorm, literally, in the public, all right, and in every culture on this planet, if we actually knew anything about our sexuality and where it originates and how it comes by us and how we react to it, are controlled by it, and used as a manipulation force through television and other platforms of presenting information. So anyway, what happened after that is this particular situation that I mentioned. I sat down And I wrote out a concept of what I thought love was for me at that time. When I looked at it afterward, I said, you know what, Mal, this is open to revision at a moment's notice. What I was doing, what I didn't really figure out at the time, is I was setting up a criteria or a belief system for myself. Something that mentally, that I could focus on as a point of reference going forward. Are you following me here? And this is what a lot of men are not able to do at this particular point in the general population who are having these twin flame connection. They've become emphatic. They're picking up all of the stuff around them. And it's a time when they need to be able to sit down and need to be able to focus on what it is that they think has happened to them. In other words, the twin flame bubble or the mystical state or the connection, whatever label you want to do. The label is not important anymore. It's the process that's unfolding that needs to be understood by everybody. So I wrote down a concept of love, and I think it was pretty primitive, okay, because I didn't have much experience at any of it. But as the heart center opened, and I began to express empathically, and I began to have more and more sporadic connections with people at the heart center, I was able to come to some conclusions, and some of them by making mistakes, that I needed to readdress my concept of love. And I did. It was a year later. And I look back a year later to the one I did originally, and some of you might want to try this, all right? This is called self-help. All right, nobody's going to do it for you. I can't do it for you. And I can tell you, there isn't some chariot with angels full of more bullshit for you coming here to help you. You're going to do it for yourself. That's why you're here. This is a self-help planet. And right now we're on a self-destruct path, but that can be prevented. So you do that. You take it out a period of time down the road when you know you've changed and you've evolved, and you reassess the situation and you rewrite it again. Then we start going along and you start figuring out, and I see people, you know, they have the twin flame connection and they're in a relationship and the relationship is never going anywhere. Sometimes the relationship is really good and they wonder why they're having the twin flame connection. There's another little question here. Why is it sometimes you meet people who are having a wonderful relationship, they're happy with their partner and they have the twin flame connection? Anybody ever ask themselves why that happens? It happens because there's an element missing in their perfect relationship called spiritual growth. And if you can't get it with your present partner, you're going to be given someone outside who's going to initiate that process within yourself by actually getting you excited. The problem with us on this planet is there are billions of us who have gotten complacent. All right, we don't like the status quo to change. We like everything to be there. We like to know the fridge is going to be full, and we like to know that there's money coming in to pay the bills, and we like to know we're going to Trinidad or Tobago, or we're going to Hawaii, or someplace like that at least once or twice a year, all right? And we like everything in the house to be in its right place and proper play. That's the status quo. And it's the same thing with your mentality. It's the same thing with your relationship, your love concept. You don't want the status quo to change. And that's why you get very defensive of your belief system. So when you change the concept of love, what you've done, as I did, I changed it a year later, I opened up the doorway for more changes in me. So what happened is I was already aware at that point that my empathic abilities were going to increase. So I was anticipated and expected it. I wasn't going to get caught with my knickers wrapped around my ankles again. And it didn't happen exactly as I said. But what happened was that as I got into the next phase, I knew it was coming, so I anticipated and I was prepared for it. Right now, when most of you have the twin flame connection, you're not prepared for it. All right? You can get prepared by going to Mel's University of YouTube channel. I like that. I really like that expression. I'm going to use that from now on because it fits. I like it. Let's do that. Okay? Let's call it Mel's University on YouTube. All right. Good one. I like it. So anyways, I got a little ego. I like to feed it too, you know. So anyways, nothing wrong with ego as long as it's in play. So anyways, what happened was as I did this, then I moved to the next concept, which was relationships. And I took a look at what did I think about a relationship. And I go back to when I first got married. And I thought about this, and this was really strange because it's almost like my whole life has been planned by me, but I didn't know it because I was asleep. I go back to my first marriage with my first wife. A wonderful lady, don't get me wrong. And I liked her. I really liked her. I liked her a lot. But to be honest, I didn't know what love was. I had no idea. And all of my friends were getting married at that time. I was 20, 21. You know, at 21, you think you got the world by the balls and you know everything and you're, all that stuff. Hasn't changed, still the same. All the 20-year-olds think they got the world by the balls and it owes them something. You don't figure out till you're later in life that the world doesn't owe you anything. All right? Actually, you owe the world for being here. In Canada, interestingly enough, every kid that comes into the world owes the government $25,000 for being here. Isn't that wonderful? Now, what kind of government is that? Huh? Well, it's the kind of government that gets a lot of taxes out of you for free, for nothing. Anyways, I won't even get on that topic. Anyways, back to what I was saying. So I changed the concept of relationship after I had a marriage. That I got married, and I figured it out after a while. The only reason I got married is because my friend did it. And I thought it was what I was supposed to do, and that's what I was programmed to do. Everybody got married, had kids, babies, and then they died. And that was it, life. And somewhere in that time between myself and my wife, and I started having all of the toys you want, the boat, the trailer, the 2 cars in the garage, and 3 TV sets, and barbecues and lots of booze on the weekend. I woke up one morning and I'm saying to myself, this is it? That's it? I'm gonna go through the rest of my life and this is it? That's all I got to live for? Go to work, come home, pay the bills, pay the mortgage, and just buy a few toys and take a holiday every year? That's it? What the hell's the point of being here? So when I realized that, and I sat down and I changed my concept of relationship as to what I was looking for in a relationship with a partner. What I was not looking for was a wife. I didn't want a wife. I wanted a partner. Some women are looking for a husband, and that's what they get, a husband. And some guys are looking for a wife, and that's what they get. And the way they get them is by what they've been programmed to believe, which isn't their own choice and reflection at all, but only what they've been programmed to believe that they should have based on their culture and their programming. And I want some of you to start realizing that the relationships you're in right now, this moment, are relationships that you didn't create. They were created for you by your belief systems. And that's why the twin flame connection is so dynamic, so intense, so charging, because you know what? We don't listen. We're too educated. We're too smart. We got it all together. So how is the evolutionary process going to get our attention? One thing I've learned about people over the years, especially in the spiritual community, we don't learn anything unless somebody comes up and smacks us in the back of the head with a 2x4. Voila, the evolutionary process comes up. And boy, I'm going to tell you, listening to some of the stories that some of you women and men have told me, you get intensity personified because that's the only way you're going to realize the experience and it's going to get your attention and you might make some changes in your life. That's how dumbed down we have become. That we need these kind of intense experiences to get our attention. And that's not an insult to anybody. To somebody who's awake and understands what I'm saying, the obvious will be there. So anyways, as it continued on, I began to do this. Now, imagine the male going through this, but doesn't have the experience or the knowledge that I have. And I learned it the hard way. Now you don't have to do it the hard way. Now what's happening is this. Each time that they separate and come back together, for example, in this evolutionary bomb blast called love, labeled twin flame, soulmate, divine partnership, divine masculine, divine feminine. There's another thing, divine masculine, divine feminine. I don't know why, but for some reason, that word hasn't been resonating with me a lot lately. I don't find the divine really fits in there anymore from an energetic perspective. It almost has like it's got religious connotations to it. And we don't need religion in the evolutionary process right now, okay, because religion needs to reconstruct itself. So anyways, over a period of time, what happens is this. As I became aware of each transition that I was going through, I became and created a mental attitude. That's the proper word I've been looking for. A mental attitude that allowed me the ability to be able to, for more expansion and more growth. This setup, because I'm seeing this happen and I'm creating it mentally, set up an addition in the process that created something else which has now been happening to a lot of people. We must get the women, but especially the men, to the point where they can express themselves vulnerably, not from the emotional center of the solar plexus or the emotional body, but from the spiritual body, which is focused in the heart center chakra. And how do we do that? We do that by, first of all, some of you ladies out there, stop looking for an eviscerated male. You don't want an eviscerated male. You want one that's still got some balls. You do. But you want one that has transitioned from the emotional expression of love, relationship, and sexuality, from the emotional experience of it, and transition up to the heart center chakra, to the spiritual expression of love, relationship, and sexuality. And we're all going to go there, I think. Oh, I'm told that's not true. We're not all going to go there. We're going to have some mishaps on the way. Okay. Anyway, so when you're doing this, what you need to understand is this: these men are in that phase where they have to have some input. If you want to help him, help him deal with the empathic side of himself. Because you know what? As I talk to some of these men, you know what? They don't even know how to talk about it. They don't know how to put it into words. They don't know how to express it. What I had to do with a lot of them is I had to literally drag it out of them by formulating the words, by tapping into them, literally, empathically. Tapping into them and giving them the words, giving them form to what they were feeling, because they don't know how. Because they don't have that knowledge. Because, as I said, guys as a general rule don't go into twin flame groups and they don't go looking for information. Guys are individual in their sense, where women tend to like to function in groups. Men like to function individually as a whole, all right, with their little kingdoms, as I mentioned before in the video. So what happens is if you want to do a favor and you're in a twin flame connection, whatever label you want to use, and you can see that the guy is having problems and the issues are coming up, remember something: in addition to the problems coming up or the issues at a personal level, he's also open empathically and feeling all of that stuff around him. I'm going to give you an example of how empathic you can become. Keep in mind here, I'm 75. I'm an old guy. Old guys my age, usually, as a general rule, not all, as a general rule, are getting pretty senile, getting laid back, and all of the other stuff in the mental faculty is starting to deteriorate. Well, I seem to be going the other way. The body is maintaining functionality, figuratively speaking, but the mentality and the mental faction and the spiritual abilities are growing intensely. So even now, and sometimes I forget, an example of empathic and being really empathic is, we had a contractor come over here a couple of years ago. Called him up, he was going to come over. And he was coming over, I think it was about 11 o'clock in the morning. And it was about 10 o'clock, about an hour before he got to the house. And all of a sudden, I didn't feel good. I didn't feel really good. I was in a kind of a sweat kind of a mood. And I was feeling very heavy, very dense. And I was having heart palpitations. And I was having difficulty breathing. And I said, what the hell's going on here? Am I having a heart attack? And I kind of went to Nicole and I said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk to this guy. You might have to do it. I said, I'm not feeling very good. So anyways, the guy finally showed up, and Nikki said, are you okay to talk to him? And I said, yeah, I guess I'm going to be okay. So I went to the door and opened the door up, and finally I realized it was him that I was picking up on. And he was probably 100 pounds overweight. He was actually sweating when he came inside the house, and he was having difficulty breathing, and even talking for him seemed to be an effort. Well, to make a long story short, immediately as I realized what happened, the symptoms disappeared. 6 months later, the guy was dead of a heart attack. So this is the kind of stuff that you can imagine that somebody in a twin flame connection is starting to pick up who've never done this before. Okay, and that's besides picking up what they're going through in the twin flame connection. I really hope you ladies are kind of getting the message here, all right? I'm not asking you to feel sorry for them. I'm not asking you to feel compassion or anything. All I'm asking you to do is to be open to understand that you're not the only one going through difficulty in these twin flame connections, all right? I can assure you that in a lot of cases, the guy's going through a lot worse than what you are. If that makes you happy, that he's as miserable or probably more miserable than you are, then you really got a problem, all right? Now, I don't want to make this video too much longer, but I just wanted to bring that in, give you some example, and give you some indication of what you can do. And what you can do is, like I said, is try to get him to talk about the empathic connection that he may be feeling surrounding him, if you can. That would be helpful. Try to give him some understanding of what he's going through. Don't be so concerned about the twin flame connection and what's going on with you. The best way to approach it is to give him some understanding of what's going on with him. To him, he's going to take that as you're really giving him up close and personal attention, and he'll be grateful for it. He will, trust me. In some cases, he may say, screw it, I don't want your information. That's fine. Then respect his wishes. That's all. Okay. So hopefully, if this video helped you out a little bit and it's beneficial, I can give you more information on it, but you're going to have to do it in a way that you specifically make a comment in a particular area that you would like me to address, or a way to go. Just being vague about something is not going to get a response from me. In order to do that, I need you to be specific in what you are looking for information on, in what area specifically, and I can talk in that area, because all I can do is generalize here in these videos. I can't individualize it for you to a smaller group unless I get a specific avenue or venue to work with. All right. And I'm going to leave it there. And thanks for being patient and listening. I rambled on a little bit longer than what I wanted to, but then I guess some of you have gotten used to that. Okay, take care, everybody.